Hey everybody, Nora's here and I'm back again with another video. So if you're new to my channel, my name is Nora. I'm 30 years old. I'm an ex-corporate slayer turned entrepreneur, influencer, and working on my real estate license here. And I talk to you all about how I'm building my glam life on this channel. So that's all things black beauty, plus size fashion, faith, and glam lifestyle. So I'm telling you all how I'm building my glam life so that we can grow, glow, and glam together. So if you're into all of that, this is the right spot for you. Join my glam squad by becoming a glam. Subscribe, like, push the bell notification icon so you can be updated as soon as I release new hot content. Invite a friend to come watch with me and we can glow, grow, and glam together. So on today's video, I'm talking to you a little bit more about my professional life, what I've done for the past 9 years as a recruiter. So what recruiting is, how to get into it, what it entails, why I enjoy it, and why I'm done with it. So if you're interested in that, get your popcorn, chocolate, wine, sit down, let's have a little chit chat today, okay y'all? See you on the other side. Alright, so I have mentioned that I have been in the recruiting industry, in the recruiting space for the entirety of my adult professional career, and I want to tell you all a little bit more about recruiting because I don't think a lot of people really understand what recruiters do, why they're essential to businesses, and if you're aware of what's happening right now with the recession. So many recruiters have been laid off, including me, and I'm going to be talking about that layoff and my career direction in other videos, but I really wanted to just kind of focus on what's happening and why it's happening so that you can make an informed decision if you are interested in getting into recruiting. So I made a bunch of notes so I don't run on too long today, but major question, a lot of people ask me how I got into recruiting. So how did I get into recruiting? If you talk to many recruiters, 9 out of 10 of them will tell you I fell into it. And I know you're like, you fell into it, but most of the time when you get into recruiting, it's not something that you're actively seeking to get into. You really just kind of fall into it. So when I graduated college, I went to Berea College, and I graduated with a bachelor's in sociology. I really was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my sociology degree, and family friend suggested that I go to a local staffing agency, and the staffing agency was owned by a gentleman whose kids I went to school with in high school and grade school, and my intent was just to find temporary work just until I was able to land something in my field. I was really trying to either get into social work or maybe even get into therapy via, you know, sociology. But nonetheless, I ended up doing an internship, but like a summer stint, temp stint, working internally for that staffing agency. And then I just continued to develop and be promoted and grow within that organization. So what really is recruiting? So recruiting is, I guess I would now say, like more talent acquisition. You have roles that need to be filled within an organization, and the recruiting team, the talent acquisition team, is responsible for partnering with the hiring managers, assessing what the need is, helping them develop and tweak job descriptions, really understanding the applicant tracking system, also known as the ATS. That's a big word in recruiting, ATS. Getting the job descriptions posted. You're partnering with human resources to get jobs coded properly in the system. Make sure job profiles are correctly in your HRS, ATS, whatever you're using. Making sure that that description looks really good. Job position description looks good externally. You could also be liaisoning between like Indeed, LinkedIn, Career Builder, ZipRecruiter, Monster, and external sites like that, where you can get your jobs posted as well to attract top talent. So not just attracting anybody, but attracting people that would have skills that meet the need of the position, that would also be great fits for the team as well, and that can really shine and excel in the role. So looking for team players, you know, they say quote unquote rock stars and that kind of thing. So that's what recruiting is. I would also say that recruiting is heavily relationship based and sales based. So in recruiting, you're selling a company to a candidate. You have to explain to that interested party why this company and this role is the best next step for them, why they should have long-term buy-in or short-term, depending on what kind of recruiting you're doing in that role, why they should have some sort of interest or buy-in for an extended period of time. So lots of sales, lots of rejection, lots of people saying no, lots of calling people, emailing people, scheduling calls, discussing the position, making it attractive, also being honest about some of the cons, some of the ugliness with the role, so that people have an accurate understanding of what they're stepping into and can make a really informed decision on whether that position and that company is a good fit for their needs and their career development goals at that time. That's essentially what the recruiter does, talent acquisition specialist does. There's tons of different titles and like career paths and in recruiting, but at the core, you are understanding the company and that particular hiring team's needs, and then finding the perfect fit, or not perfect because no one's perfect, but finding someone that can really do the job well and really enjoy doing the job. So that melding in the middle and finding the perfect match without it being too perfect. So that's kind of what recruiting is, or essentially what it is. How I got into it, I fell into it. So I started off at a staffing agency. I bring that up because there's different kinds of recruiting. You've got your staffing agency, could be more short term, or you know, people on contracts, or in staffing I can find the right person and we can do like a direct hire placement. So when I was at the staffing agency where I worked here, I started off just floating around to different offices. We had a clerical division at the time, so they were doing more administrative and more professional roles. And then we had a light industrial and manufacturing department, and I worked in that office primarily. So we did your, you know, general pick pack, unskilled labor, basic labor, boxing items, being on the food lines and that kind of stuff. And we were working with, you know, local food companies, local manufacturing companies, and finding the laborers. We also did skilled labor, so your maintenance and your quality control and your forklift operators and your heavy machine operators and those kind of things. So people that required more skill and people who require minimum to no skill. Oftentimes though, the need could be like peak season around the holidays, could just be 2 to 3 months. Other times they could do year contracts with the people, or again, we had direct hire placement where if we found someone that was qualified, the company would go ahead and buy them out. So that's kind of how staffing worked. Eventually I transitioned into corporate recruiting, and it was more full cycle, and I like to call full cycle from womb to tomb, whereas with staffing you're only involved in a certain portion of it, like finding the person, like you do a basic onboarding with the organization, and they're technically an employee of your organization and not the company until the company either decides to, you know, buy out the contract and roll them over, or, you know, just axe that person working with them all together. But in a more full life cycle recruiting type position, you're doing from beginning to end. So typically that person works with your organization. So say for instance, I worked at a nonprofit organization here. I'll talk about nonprofits later. So I was responsible from the beginning. Hiring manager would reach out to me, hey, we have a need, explain what the need is. Is it new growth, new business, like an addition because of additional business, or did we lose somebody? Is there something going on here with the team? We lost somebody. So I get in, talk with the hiring manager, kind of figure out what's going on, and then what position we need to post. Do you want to keep this position? Are we tweaking the position? Is it assuming additional responsibilities? How do you want this position marketed before I get everything posted? So we agree on the job description and responsibilities. I ensure if it's a new position, I go to HR and make sure that we get it coded properly and into our ATS. If it's a current, regular role, I'll go ahead and get the position posted. Typically you post, you don't have to put like an end date on the post if you don't want to. It depends on compliance rules. Whatever industry you're in may have some compliance regulations regarding how long it could be posted and all of that stuff. So you learn with each position, and each state has their own posting requirements as well. But you get the position posted, and then you are actively involved in partnering with the hiring teams, screening all the resumes, doing all the candidate interviews, walking and supporting the candidate through the interview process, also supporting the managers through the interview process too. So on my end, being a liaison for both. What kind of questions should you be asking the hiring manager as a candidate in this role? Applying for this role. What kind of questions to the hiring manager should you be asking a candidate to vet to see if they are, someone that's a viable candidate for this position? Not just for the position, but for how the team, the team environment and how they all work together. Team cohesiveness is what I'm trying to say. To the outside of that, consistently making sure that if I've got a position posted or if it's integrated maybe into LinkedIn or some other places, that I'm getting traction there, monitoring where the sources are for the applicants. Am I heavy on LinkedIn right now? Is LinkedIn a good source for me? Is Indeed a good source, or some random association? We've got places on our ATS where people can tell us where they're finding the job, how they're hearing about us. And that's a good way for me to kind of understand as a recruiter where my pool is being developed and what places I can tap into. Say somebody quits and we need to get somebody else in quickly. Average, you want to shoot for anywhere between 30 to 40 days time to fill. Could be less than that. Also, kind of a game of finding quality talent as quickly as possible, which is really difficult in certain markets, in certain industries. Healthcare hiring can be a lot more difficult when it comes into finding people with certain certifications and licensures, and sometimes that time to fill could be 45 to 60 days. Location impacts that as well. Sometimes in rural locations, it could take 60 to 90 days to fill a position based on the certifications, the qualifications, and requirements for the role and the person taking on the role. So a lot of those things go in. As a recruiter, your manager is helping you monitor. You're monitoring yourself, your time to fill, time to close, those kind of things. There's a lot of metrics done that is presented to the company to be able to show, improve your worth and show trends of what's going on in the current market. Like, one position type may take you typically 20 days to fill. So if it's taking you 35 days or longer, then your manager could say, are you exercising the right, are you employing the right strategies to find the right candidate? Because in the past it's taken only 20 days or such amount of days. But it could be something going on in the market, or you could have a competitor now that's paying more for the same position type. So then you can kind of go in and say, well, 3 of our employees with the same type left and went to so-and-so because they're paying $5 more. Do we need to increase the pay rate to try to get someone in faster and to be more competitive? So these are the kinds of conversations that you're having, with your hiring team, with your organizational leaders, with your management team when you are in the recruiting role. So that's what I do as a recruiter. Full life cycle entails me actually finding somebody. So hiring manager decides, hiring team decides on the candidate. I make the offer to the candidate. I'm drafting the offer, or sometimes just how organizations are structured, there may be a TA coordinator who drafts the offer, HR generalist or HR coordinator may draft the offer. Organizations do have their own processes. But generally with full life cycle recruiting, you're drafting your own offer, getting the offer out to the candidate. There's salary negotiation, so there could be a pushback from a candidate on what they want for the role. So throughout this process, and especially on the front end in your initial screen with candidates, you're figuring out, what do you need? What are you looking for in your next role? You know, what are you looking for in your next organization? What are your salary expectations? How much do you need to be compensated to do these responsibilities? And sometimes it may change as the person navigates throughout the interview process and learns more about what the actual role entails from the hiring team, or, you know, as they interview with other organizations that are offering a similar title, or, you know, based on the market, they may decide they want more at the end. So as a recruiter, you're responsible for navigating and facilitating that salary negotiation between the candidate and the hiring team to ensure that y'all can come to an agreement. For the hiring team, it could be, our budget is strictly this and we can't do it. It could be me saying, hey, you know, this is a quality candidate, the market has changed, and other companies, these 3 companies that are our direct competitors, are paying 5 times more than us for this role, and our benefits aren't as comparable. We need to offer this money or we're not getting anyone in. So having that kind of conversation, that kind of back and forth, to really have your hiring manager understand what the market's like, or that candidate is asking for a fair offer, and either you pay them fairly or you underpay them, they accept, and then go to another client 30 to 60 or 90 days down the line. So that kind of thing. Really being an advocate and liaison for both your candidate and the hiring manager and the company in the process, which do a recruiting full life cycle. But after that, getting the offer out, partnering with your TA coordinator, to recruiting assistant to ensure that the background, any kind of credentialing is done. Again, partnering with HR to ensure that onboarding is done, making sure the candidate knows what to expect. Hey, it normally takes about 2 weeks for the background to come back. This is what information you need to, not specifically what information, but these are kind of the things it's asking for. If it's credentialing, most healthcare organizations require some sort of credentialing to do certain things, especially when insurance and billing is involved. So you have to be credentialed to do certain activities, and that requires certain certifications and documentation provided, and walking them through the credentialing process, what to expect, how long it should take, partnering with the credentialing team to ensure that they're credentialed properly. So that's a whole nother process as a recruiter that you're involved in. So really advocating and liaisoning through that process, womb to tomb, getting that employee all the way through to walking in that door and working in the role. And then, since you're typically the first person that employee is talked to, you are their go-to, even more so than HR sometimes, when they have questions about paperwork and where does this go and who do I go to. So just being a resource once they're there too, and really making sure that they have a great candidate experience. And I say to tomb, womb to tomb, because either a few things will happen. That person will do a great job and move up, be promoted, and you'll have to fill the position again, or things happen and that person will decide that position no longer serves them, and they'll exit the organization, which leaves the position available again, womb to tomb. So partnering with HR to say, hey, you know, management and HR, so-and-so is now left, understanding why so-and-so left. Was it an issue with the managers? You know, sometimes it's not the position, sometimes it's management. Sometimes there's a lack of resources. Sometimes there are things that are going on the team that cause people to leave. And if you're consistently hiring for the same position, there's a high turnover, there's a problem somewhere. Whether it's they're not being paid enough to do the job is too time consuming, and there's not a lot of work-life balance, or there's poor management going on somewhere. And you as a recruiter have to ask those hard-hitting questions. Come on, manager, what's really happening here? Or it could be you exit surveys that tomb end are really helpful for you as well. As a recruiter, partner with HR to understand What did the last 5 people say as they exited? Did they all say that pay was an issue? At some point, if the last 5 people left because they're not being paid enough to live, the next 5 people are going to leave too if you don't increase the pay and offer better benefits. You know, so targeting what triggers are causing certain trends in our recruiting and monitoring the market trends and all of that and how it's impacting our hiring and terminations, which cause us to have to hire again. So that's what I do more full cycle. It's a little bit more complex in the staffing, and that on staffing you are involved in one part of it, finding the candidate, getting the candidate in. But the rest of it as a full life cycle, you do so much with educating and coaching the hiring managers, as well as educating and coaching the candidate turn employees. Also, you're keeping contact with these candidates. Maybe they're not a good fit for the role right now, or it's not a good fit for their needs at the time, but a year from then they may be interested again, and you've already built a rapport and a relationship with that person, and you'll be the best person to say, hey, you know, we've got this position, a different kind of position available. I think it's a little bit different than what you're looking for right now. It may be a better fit for you. Are you interested in having a call or a conversation about it? Let's schedule a 30-minute call to kind of debrief, see where you are currently, see if you're interested in this role, things like that. That's more full life cycle. I rambled a little bit there, but let's see. That kind of explains to you what recruiting is and why recruiters are important, because managers don't always see, like, they don't always understand the issues or things that make it difficult to get people in the door. They don't see all the things that go on the back end. They just know that they have a need and they need you to fill that need ASAP. Because when you don't have people there to do the job, it drags and wears down on the current team, and it makes it more cumbersome for you to deliver whatever product or service to your client, and there can be negative business impact when you don't have the people that you need to do the role. That's why recruiting and recruiters, talent acquisition, highly important. Highly, highly, highly important. So some job titles and kind of how to get into recruiting if you're new to it. So you got sourcers, and they're people who focus strictly on building candidate pools and getting candidates to your job postings. So they understand like Boolean searching and different kind of searching. They understand different associations and places to go, job boards to go, sites to go to find qualified candidates, and they're there to kind of help alleviate some of that responsibility on the recruiter. Some recruiters can have hundreds of roles assigned to them. It just depends on how big the organization is and what types of roles, and it helps the recruiter spend more time on being that liaison and that advocate for the candidates and the hiring manager when they're not stuck worrying about trying to do the sourcing as well. Some positions do require sourcing, meaning that they may not, like if you post a job on your website and you post the job on Indeed or LinkedIn or somewhere, it's not going to automatically draw in a large pool of candidates. So you have to do extra work to find that needle in the haystack. Again, it could be searching, like LinkedIn Recruiter is a great spot that I've gone to, for instance, for example, try to find ECMO recruiters. Oh my God, ECMO, registered respiratory therapist, and ECMO RNs. ECMO is a kind of skilled nursing or a skilled sector, a niched skilled sector in like the surgical base healthcare field, and it's kind of hard to tap into, but there are places to find qualified ECMO RNs and RRTs, and I had to do a lot of searching and finding specific associations, figure out where they're certified, programs where they're, you know, being trained and that kind of thing. But I had to source. The applicants weren't just readily applying, if that makes sense. So you got sourcers, you got junior recruiters, like entry-level recruiters, people who are really learning about recruiting. They've never done recruiting before. I will say, because recruiting is so sales heavy, generally your staffing agencies and even some of your corporate organizations tend to market themselves, their recruiting roles, to people who are fresh out of college. So that's what happened to me. I was fresh out of college. They taught me the industry, and then either you're able to sink or swim. One thing I want to mention about recruiting, I'll talk about it later when it comes into pay, never mind. But you got your recruiter. Sometimes you could be a talent acquisition specialist, just depends. You've got like a talent acquisition team lead recruiter. When I was at a nonprofit organization, I was a talent acquisition business partner, because there was more heavy. I did more HR work as well in that role, and generally HR owns one part and TA owns another part. But as a business partner to the business, I did a little bit of everything. You got contract recruiters, people who are just brought in to help on a temporary basis. Typically, again, if there's a peak season or influx in work and you need to like churn out new hires quickly. You got your corporate or executive recruiters, so they could be working like hiring your payroll team at an organization, hiring your finance team, hiring the tech team. You know, could be hiring other people on the HR team or even other recruiters. Your executive staffing, so your C-suite, your VPs, your directors, your higher level positions at an organization. You got your technical recruiters, so your software engineers, data specialists, like those kind of people. You got people that do pharmaceutical, niche-based recruiting. And then you've got like TA managers, your TA directors. They can either report up to the chief human resource officer, or they've got their own, you know, TA org chart built in, just that. Then you got like global TA specialists, global TA managers, global this, global talent advisors. Those are typically job titles that you'll see in the recruiting industry. And I didn't have typically they look for people that have like an HR or business background. So you've got a bachelor's in HR, human resource management, bachelor's in business or anything like that. I came in with a bachelor's in sociology, but I actually think understanding trends and people helped me with building relationships and helped me with coming up with plans on how to find candidates when the market was working against me. But that's kind of what people are looking for entry-level roles, and then so on and so forth. You got your entry level, you got your mid-level, and then you got your senior level. So I want to talk a little bit about industries. There's tons of industries, but manufacturing is a huge industry where you'll see people recruiting. So again, your light industrial and your more experienced industrial. Healthcare is a huge industry too. The tech industry is big right now as well. So those are three industries. I would say pharmaceutical is another industry that's really huge. And then they have niche industries like your engineering and your gas and this and then the other. So they've got some niche industries, but manufacturing is always a huge one to get into. And healthcare, I would say, is really stable. So I talked a little bit about staffing versus full life cycle recruiting in regards to actually doing the role, what the roles entail. But there's some differences in the pay structure too. So typically when you're in staffing, you've got like a base hourly pay, and then you really generate money based on the hires you're making. So it's hourly plus commission. Generally your full life cycle recruiting is more salaried, or sometimes it could be hourly too for like more entry level. But your more mid to senior level full life cycle recruiting roles are salaried. I want to talk a little bit about contract recruiting versus actual recruiting through the company. So as a contract recruiter, you can make more money hourly or salary, but you're not getting benefits. That makes sense. So what you would get, the perks of being an actual permanent employee with the organization, you don't get. So because of that, they typically try to pay you a higher hourly rate to compensate for what you're not getting. As a employee of the organization, you're getting benefits, so your medical, your dental, your vision, if you elect, your PTO, but sometimes those rates, the salaries are a lot lower because they are offering you those other things. So for about the last four or 5 years in the recruiting industry or lane for me, I worked as a salaried recruiter. When I started off in staffing, I was hourly plus commission. The cool thing about that is when you do well, you do well. There were times that I was making, maybe anywhere between $600 a month in commission, could have been $700. Sometimes around the holidays, I could be generating like $1,000 or $2,000 in commission a month. It just depends. But when the industry is bad or something's going on and you've got an office that has multiple locations in staffing, the main goal is to keep all the offices afloat. So your office may do really well, but if none of the other offices, break even, y'all struggle with your commission, because at that point you're trying to keep everybody afloat, or at least that's how it worked when I was in staffing. So that was one thing that made it rough. The base rates are not always enough to really keep you afloat and help you pay your bills, and that's not good when you can't control all the time. Like maybe you get down to the tail end, you think you got a hire made, you think you're going to generate the commission, and something happens. The company's no longer able to hire, so you've lost your commission. Or the employee that they're going to hire no longer wants to work with the organization. Maybe they found a permanent role and what you have no longer works, so you lose your commission. Your money fluctuates, like your income fluctuates from month to month. And for some people that is nice and it's okay for them, but for me, after a while, that stopped being attractive. It stopped being attractive. And I will say, I made great commission. I don't want to say that I like money, but when money is involved, it incentivizes me to do more. Not to say that I don't do more. Like, I've worked nonprofit, so I bust my butt getting underpaid. But in the staffing realm, I like to make commission. I like to make money, and making the money motivates me to make more money. So when I was getting to those spaces where, there were things outside of my control that were impacting my ability to make my money, I was like, I want something a little bit more stable. So I did transition into more full life cycle, what you call more corporate recruiting, so that I could guarantee that I at least had a base to cover my rent and my bills, and that I wasn't at a deficit. So staffing worked for me when I lived with mommy and daddy, and then when I got into the big girl world and got my own apartment, full life cycle recruiting is what I had to do. So hopefully that helps when it comes down to pay. Now, you can make good money in recruiting, especially on contract. So I don't want to tell all of my business, but in my last role, the role that I was laid off from, I was making more than $50 an hour. And then time and a half for any overtime. Yeah, my checks were really good. My checks were really, 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 really good. So if you want to live your boss, glam girl, that soft life everyone's talking about, glam girl, black girl luxury, you can do that with recruiting. It just depends on the industries and the position and how long you've been in it. I want to talk a little bit more about being black in a role like this, being black as a recruiter. So when I started in recruiting, I was fresh out of college. I'm plus size like I am now. I had gone to private school, so I've been I'm used to being, you know, the only or one of three black people in a predominantly white space. So I've learned how to assimilate and to navigate predominantly white spaces and that culture, that climate, that atmosphere. I've learned how to navigate it. But it doesn't mean that the pressure or the weight, the heaviness of being the only black person and being young in a predominantly white space isn't as traumatic. I think it's always traumatic. You just learn how to make your money. So when I started this staffing agency, you know, young, black, plus size, educated, a lot of those white people were not used to me. They were not used to encountering black people like me. I think they were used to encountering black people who were not educated, who had been struggling in life, and like they were used to a certain type of black person. And so I became a threat being young and educated in their predominantly white space. And I remember at one point, one of the managers would do like a question, like a fun question every week. And we had a math question, and I suck at math, but I was able to comprehend enough to figure out the answer. And I remember the manager in the office, he was the area manager who did the questions. The manager in the office was like, oh, well, I knew you would figure out, like a condescending way. Being black in certain spaces, you have to deal with other people's prejudices against you and other people. That's just in corporate, being in corporate. I'm going to do a separate video where I talk about navigating corporate America, but I will say it's rough sometimes being a black recruiter because just general people don't listen to your advice, especially when you're a black woman. White men do not like to hear what you have to say. White men do not like for you to hold them accountable. White women don't either, honestly. But white men really do not like you holding them accountable. They don't like it. They don't like it. They don't like it. They don't like it. And they don't like it. So I learned a lot being that I started in recruiting at 21. I've learned a lot about being black in predominantly corporate white spaces and recruiting. Now I will say, when I started off in staffing, I do really well with building relationships with people, and there's a word that I agree with that my area manager at the time said that I had. You can go research it. I don't remember the lady who talked about it in sales, but he said, you got comeback sauce, and he sent me the video. And comeback sauce is the way you engage people in a way that they continue to come back to you. And I was so good with people that grown men, like we had grown men with felonies that would cuss everybody else out in there, but they respected me. You know what I mean? I'd be the youngest person in there, the only black person in there, and young, you know, I'm the oddball out, but I would be the only one sometimes that could talk people off of ledges when we were in stressful situations in that arena. And I think that that's a skill that will help you, especially in recruiting, whether it's staffing or full life cycle. Having comeback sauce, people will consistently come back to you because they like you, and they'll bring people to you because they like you. So it helps you fill your roles because you built a pool, you built a network, and you built a reputation. People like you. So that benefited me, not looking like everybody else, having a different experience, a different perspective, and being able to communicate with people differently allowed me to make better relationships with the clients that we had coming in that were wanting to be placed. But I got a lot of pushback from my teammates because they were threatened by me. They didn't know how to handle me. Many of them had never really had to encounter black people. At the time that I came to that company, I think there was only 2 black people. We only kept 2 black people. We never had more. Out of a team of almost 50 people, we only kept 2 black people at a time. And they were never male. We would only have 2 black women. And I got asked a lot of stuff, like, you know, about black hair and black life. And, you know, we had Mike Brown, like those murders were going on at the time that I was in predominantly white spaces, and trying to navigate that, things that are happening to black people and injustices to black people in predominantly white spaces when they don't give a, is heavy. It's heavy. It's very, 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 very heavy. So that's what I'll say. Being young, or just being black, young and black, or black in general. Also being plus size in a role where I'm doing sales. People don't always assume that because I'm not your standard of beauty, that people aren't going to want to buy from me or hear from me, or that people aren't going to find me attractive. But my blackness has helped me so much. When I was in nonprofit recruiting, I would go to universities and go to career fairs at universities, and there would be so many black students that would come up to me, and I'd have my hair natural like this, or, you know, kikir in my fro, and they would be so happy to see me, like in a gym full of white people telling you about their companies. I would be like the only or one of 3 black recruiters there, and that stood out to other kids, you know, the university kids, the black kids at the university, and empowered them. That representation mattered to them. So that was one way I was able to benefit from being black, or it empowered me. I guess I would say that was one thing that fueled me staying in recruiting and in that particular role that I was in, because so many black students were happy to see my black face at the career fair. You go in as a university student and you're afraid, like, I'm trying to figure out my future, my next steps. I want an internship, or I'm looking for a job, and I'm trying to liaison and put my best foot forward, network with these representatives at these organizations. And it's even more terrifying when you walk into a gymnasium and nobody looks like you, and nobody talks like you, and nobody's had experiences like you. So I think if there's anything that I can say I've loved the most about recruiting, it's been me being able to go to career fairs, and black women and black men being able to let their guard down a little bit, not still be professional with me, but not feel as on edge or threatened or concerned about how they're being perceived when they're talking to company representatives. So that's my experience being young and black, being black. And I'll say being plus size and black in a sales-based role, you'd be surprised how many men hit on you. That was a big issue for me when I worked in staffing, and it was some of the reason why I really made the decision to work more remotely, because I would have men flirting with me at the window, men flirting with me on the phone, and to the white people, they didn't think that I was beautiful because I'm not white. But men have eyeballs, whether they're black, white, Puerto Rican. Men have eyeballs, and if they think you look good, they will let you know. And I consistently in the spaces had issues with men hitting on me in the sales role, and that made it so bad, because I'm like, I'm trying to do my job, you know, I'm trying to be professional, and at the end of the day, you still see me as a piece of meat. So being young, being black, and being plus size in corporate America is a very interesting experience. Non-profit life, I wanted to talk about that because it really taught me the most about recruiting. So I worked for a non-profit here locally for about close to 3 years, and that organization provided community-based mental health services to low-income communities here in Tennessee and in 4 other states. And it's a well-known organization. I'm not going to name it, but nonprofit recruiting was the most, working at a nonprofit was probably the best and the worst decision of my life. It was the best because they stretched me into so many other areas that I had so much experience to add to my resume. But it was the worst because I was terribly underpaid, and I was always doing what I shouldn't have to do because we didn't have enough hands on deck. Nonprofits are rough in general because while they may give you a okay salary starting out, they struggle with giving you your market increases, you know, your annual reviews. They struggle with giving you consistent raises. You're not getting commission, you're rarely getting bonuses, and then the turnover in nonprofits are so high because the pay is poor. A lot of people are there because of the mission, but mission doesn't keep you fed. And I got to a place where I did the best I could to try to prove myself worthy when I was already worthy, and I was never getting compensated fairly or offered opportunities fairly. You know what I mean? I feel like as a black woman, that ceiling is always there, and it's so hard to break that ceiling, and people put you in a box, and you get to a place where you may be doing better than your managers, and your managers may be threatened by you. This was my first time that I worked on a team that was predominantly black and led by a black person, and I will say it was probably one of the most chaotic experiences that I've had. But I think the level that made it more chaotic was the fact that it was at a nonprofit and they made money, but they didn't want to pay money to their employees. We had teams that were going 3 and 4 years without any kind of pay increase, and you know how the markets change. With that said, if they're not willing to do pay increases to their current employees, they weren't always willing to offer fair market wages to new people coming in. So it made it even more difficult to hire qualified talent because it was well known that we were the lowest paying organization in our field in the area. And so I just felt like I was hitting a brick wall trying to get resources and funding and help, or be able to think outside of the box and be able to partner with marketing to do creative initiatives. I didn't have the resources or the buy-in. And I think those are issues. If you search TikTok and other places and people talk to you about their experiences in nonprofit, you'll hear everyone say the same thing. I learned a whole lot about myself. I learned a whole lot about organizations, and I learned a whole lot about why nonprofit organizations don't do better than they are doing, because of how their organizational structure and their leaders and how they place value, what they place value on and what they don't place value on, and how they exploit people with the mission as like the little thing that you hold over their head. But you should be here for the mission. I remember we were on a call and they had let a whole bunch of people go, and my team hadn't gotten a raise in 3 years, and they were trying to motivate us to keep going. And they kept talking about, well, we know you're here because you love the mission. And I'm like, mission is not keeping these people fed. Like these people, like when I tell you, when I worked at a nonprofit, I picked up part-time jobs on the side just to make it, because I wasn't making enough money as a full-time recruiter at this organization. And there were other like employees who were managers who had picked up part-time roles or full-time roles as well because they were not making enough money to get by. So that's one thing I would say. If you're considering working at a nonprofit, be able to negotiate your salary well, and also know when to leave. Know when to leave. I've known people that have stayed for 20 and 30 years and don't have much to show from it outside of, I enjoyed what I was doing, but did my company respect me? Did I get work that grew me as a person or challenged me? You know, I could be a little bit jaded, but I would definitely say at the end of the day, as a recruiter, yes, you care about mission and doing the reward from your job is important. Not just making money, the reward from your job is important. Being happy about what you're doing is important. But you need to be able to pay your bills. You need to be able to pay for food. And nonprofits are a little sketchy when it comes to how they place value on their employees and fair work-life balance and fair pay. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't do it again. Learn how to negotiate salaries. So as a recruiter, you have to learn how to negotiate your salary. This could be for candidates as well. One thing I say is, now when I interview with organizations and we're in that initial screen, like, so what would you like to be paid for this role? I ask them, what is the range for this position? What do you have aligned for the responsibilities of this role? Because every company has a salary range for that particular position, and it can vary by the location, it can vary by the type of position or the responsibilities, etc., etc. But every company has an idea or a ballpark of what they want to offer, the range, high end and low end and mid, of what they want to offer for that position. And your goal is to make sure that you're not undercutting yourself. So I always say, don't go in showing your cards. Be willing to say no. Be willing to understand that, hey, if I need such and such to live and you're not going to do it, it's going to be a consistent struggle with you as I grow with you. You know what I mean? If you're not able to pay me fairly on the front end, how can I expect you to pay me fairly throughout my tenure with you? That's what I would think about. But I always ask first, tell me what your range is. And then I think, what do I need based on my living expenses and that kind of thing, what I want to be doing. I include my side business, you know, my social media influencing. What do I need to invest in my business to be able to enjoy life? So you're not just trying to make money to make ends meet. You want to make enough money so that you're comfortable. I want to let you all know that working in corporate America, especially working in recruiting, is a lot of brain work. Some people do a lot of physical labor and they're able to come home and detach. But when you do brain work, the way that you do in corporate America, it's really difficult to detach. And in recruiting, you have to get your offers out. Like, you're being judged based on your time to fill and your time to close, but your ability to fill. So if you're not getting positions filled, you're not going to be there long. You're not going to be there long if you're not getting positions filled. So getting offers out, getting offers accepted. Because you're in a sales type role, sometimes the way your schedule works is interesting, meaning that, like when I was in recruiting, people would call me back at 8 or 9 o'clock, or some people would call me at 6 or 7 o'clock, or I'd have to call them after they got off of work at 6 or 7 o'clock. Then I'm factoring in, if I'm working in different regions, what the time zone is and what the time conversion is and when it's appropriate to reach out. And so because I had to be more flexible with my schedule, I need to be paid more because you're expecting a lot from me. You know what I mean? You're expecting me to be flexible a whole lot. Sometimes people want to call early that morning. They call it 7 o'clock because they're in Florida and it's 8 o'clock there. You know, those kind of things you have to factor in when you're negotiating your salary. How much overtime realistically are you going to have to work? In a salary role, you're not getting paid for your overtime. So make sure that you get what you need to get on the front end. Understand what their projects are like and what kind of work they're expecting you to do. What the recruiting volume is. So you may need to be maybe Saturday mornings calling people, but you're not getting paid extra for that. So if that's the case, you need to say, okay, well, what do I realistically need to be paid that encompasses the fact that I'm going to be calling people on Saturdays or late Fridays, or, you know, the time constraint on you. I would always say sit down and figure that stuff out. Also, people kind of factor in going into the office versus working remotely. Again, the pandemic did great things because it allowed us to work remotely, but there's a big push now to push people back into the office. I have my own opinions about companies trying to control people and not liking that they're working from home because they can't control them, because that's really what is happening, and I feel that way. I prefer to work from home. I like to work from home. I like working from home, working remotely, because I experience office politics less. And I can manage my response to office triggers in a better way in my own home space. So there's racism in the corporate space. I call corporate space corporate plantation. I refer to corporate America as a corporate plantation, and you have to really understand what you want to be paid and what you want to get out of that experience to make it worth it to work on the plantation. So that's why I'm saying that in regards to salary negotiation. But it could be you saying, I need a stipend for my phone, I need a stipend for my internet, or you know, I need a stipend for such and such. All of these things, the benefits, what kind of benefits am I getting, what kind of PTO am I getting, you know, what is in it for me to take on this role. Really be an advocate for yourself. And we're in a season now where, outside of all of these layoffs, typically companies try to get the best quality talent for the lowest buck. So you have to advocate for yourself. If you don't advocate for you, no one will. So you know, when I left I was let go from my last job. They let go all the contractors. I talked about it in another video. Again, I was making more money than I'd ever made in my career. I was making over $50 an hour, and then plus time and a half on the actual rate. So you can make good money in recruiting with your experience, your expertise, being able to show your results, that kind of thing. But you have to ask for it. And I'll say the big thing that even pigeonholed me into the hourly rate that I did get was because the company had offered a generic screening position that paid less. And at the time, I was open to just screening and not doing the full cycle process. And so I said, okay, yeah, go ahead and submit me for the screening. And then when I did the interview with the hiring manager at the time, we went over my recruiting experience and decided that it would be better for me to be in a recruiting role, and that they had a recruiting role upcoming, and they offered me the recruiting role at a higher rate. But because I had already negotiated on the lower rate for the screening role, the staffing agency didn't want to offer me, or didn't allow me to negotiate more for the recruiter role, because it was significantly more than the screening role. And I got pigeonholed, and I could have negotiated more for the recruiting had I not kind of been pigeonholed there. And I really, at that point, because it was the most money I had made, I just went ahead and was like, okay, I'm not going to argue. I tried to negotiate, I did try, but I didn't fight it the way that I could have fought it. And what I would have said with my knowledge now is, at the time, the initial position that you offered me was different, in a different set of responsibilities than the role I was offered. And now, with the knowledge of the responsibilities for the role that I am being offered, my desired compensation rate has changed. And had I said that, I would have been able to make more money in my last position. But nonetheless, that's on salary negotiations. Make sure you advocate for yourself. Again, I talked earlier about representation mattering. When you are black in recruiting, I try to make sure I'm on my P's and Q's. I try to make sure that all of my I's are dotted and my T's are crossed, because there's even more scrutiny on you just being black. People have their perceptions. You got different people from different generations and varying age groups and backgrounds, and again, they do bring their prejudices into the workplace. They're not supposed to, but they do. And you're under a microscope as a black person in corporate America, whether you like it or not. You are under a microscope, and you have to learn how to acclimate so you can make your money and get by. Again, representation matters because you're there. I was the first black recruiter at that nonprofit organization that I worked with, and that's within my lifetime. I'm only 30 years old. So for me to have been the first black recruiter, and they've been around for a minute, says a whole lot. And somewhere in the 2000s, let's see, after 2010, let's say I got out of college in 2014, somewhere between 2017, 2018, or 2019, I was the first black recruiter for this organization. So that says a lot, that in 2018, at 20 something years old, 24, 25, I was the first black recruiter at this organization. Nonetheless, I did open the door, and then afterwards, after me, there were more black people that were able to come into the space. So you coming in I know this sounds so archaic and it's so crappy that it's even a thing, but you come in being a rock star does pave the way for others. Also, being black as a recruiter has helped me because white recruiters don't recognize or do and don't care that they have implicit biases and prejudices that impact their screening processes, even down to people's names and where they've lived and where they've gone to school and that kind of thing. And I've noticed that in organizations that I've come into, there have been more diversity hired because of me. That says a lot. So there is power in being a black recruiter. I think diversity in recruiting is heavily needed, because when you have all white recruiting teams, they are tending to hire people who look like them, whether they mean to or not. And it keeps the organization white, and it keeps people that think the same, and it runs the organization to the ground because everybody looks the same and thinks the same, and you can't grow that way. So some of the reasons why I love recruiting: I like being representation at career fairs where black people can come up to me and feel heard, feel respected, and feel safe. I love that. I love also being plus size at these places to show them that I'm a badass plus size girl and I'm going to rock out in any environment that I'm in. I just remember one girl telling me, "You're so articulate. You just speak so well. You know, I'm just so impressed by you. I'm really happy to see you." That was motivating for her, and I will never forget that. Like, you don't understand who you are empowering and encouraging just by being in the room, just by taking up the space and being in the room. And I think more companies lose out on getting candidates because they keep sending white. I'm not knocking white people. I'm just saying. They keep sending white people as their representatives. And who wants to, like, really, as a candidate, when I go through these organizations, I'm about to interview with the company, I'm going through and looking at your executive team. You got all white people, and especially all white men making decisions at this organization. And I go down the org chart if I have access to it. You got predominantly white people in leadership. I'm not trying to work for you. I understand how that works. That how you're going to operate. I'm not trying to work with you. Nor do I want to work with organizations that performatively hire diversity just for their numbers and not to actually utilize their expertise and grow them and treat them like regular people. So that's another thing that you encounter too in the hiring process and the interviewing process as a candidate. But I love recruiting because I have people, when people thank me, like, I really enjoy this job. You know, I'm so happy I came to this company. I have a guy that I placed at my last organization, and I'm no longer there, but he still reaches out to me periodically and says, "Hey, I love this job. This is the best job. I've had a great time here. I'm so thankful that I'm here, and you made that happen." And that makes me feel good to know that he really has satisfaction in this role, that this was a really good placement for him. That makes me feel good, because people can go anywhere. But to know that I was able to hear their needs and match what they needed to this organization and help them be better and help them grow, that gives me some sense of reward and pride in what I'm doing. So that's why I enjoy recruiting. I also like finding a missing piece to a puzzle. I like getting positions closed. I like getting people on teams. I like seeing teams diversify and grow. But why I never want to do it again. The heaviness of being black in corporate America and being black in predominantly white spaces and being plus size and female and black, being a woman in black in all these spaces. I'm tired of corporate politics. I am tired of corporate politics, and I'm burnt out with corporate politics, and I'm burnt out. I'm at a place of burnout, and it's not something I want to continue to do. Like, in my early 20s, I really was like, oh yeah, I want to be like a TA manager. I really want to be a human resources director. But it was something that happened in the role at that nonprofit that had me realize that this is no longer a place. Recruiting isn't where I want to build a career. I'm no longer, I don't find passion in it anymore. Like, I'm happy to help people, but I don't wake up eager to do it anymore. I used to be excited about going to work, and now I don't care anymore. And that's kind of how I feel about recruiting and corporate in general. I don't want to be in corporate anymore. I actually enjoy influencing. And I'm interested in real estate. I did finish my real estate course. I'll talk about that some more in another video. But corporate is a plantation. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of mistreatment and retaliation that goes on. People feel threatened by you. And to spend 40 or plus hours in that kind of environment takes a toll on your body, your blood pressure, you being able to function for real. It's a huge time constraint. And I'm at a place where I'm trying to figure out how to make different streams of income that don't make me hate waking up every day. And now I was laid off, so there's a huge recession going on, and recruiters have been on the front line, the forefront of being let go. And just like 2020, they let all the recruiters go. You out of a job, you know, kicked to the curb. You're no longer valuable to these organizations. And then they decide that they want to hire, and they'll bring somebody in and pay them less to do more of what you know what I mean? Like, it's just no longer a good skill. Sometimes it's really hard when you're black to move up, to be promoted, and to prove your worth. And I'm just tired of dealing and navigating with that. I think it's a good time right now to pivot as a recruiter. If you're not in industries that are pretty stable regardless of what's going on, I think it's kind of a time to diversify your skill set. Work on the businesses or whatever God has placed in your heart. Work on those things and be open to pivoting and changing, because every day people are getting laid off. Not to operate in fear or push fear on you, but I think there's always room to ensure that you're not so loyal to your organization that you're no longer loyal to yourself and developing yourself and growing. Again, I said glam, grow, glow, that thing. You still have to grow so that you can glow and glam. And you can get stagnant sometimes in certain recruiting roles. It's hard to move into the TA manager role, and there's so many politics that go into it that I don't say don't do it, because I love to see black people excelling and rocking it. And if you're non-black watching this, it's not a not or a diss to you, but I am a black woman, and my channel is going to be here to help uplift black people and elevate them in spaces, because we don't get this kind of elevation and mentorship everywhere. So hope you can understand that, and if you can't, I'm not able to be concerned. But nonetheless, that's why I want to get out of corporate, and I'm not in corporate right now after I was let go. Just seeing how companies operate when they don't need you, they don't care anymore, and they just drop you like a hot potato and then find somebody else to do your role for less. Just how the mentality of organizations, how they work, I'm just not there for it anymore. And I don't know where this is going to lead me, but I'm not doing it anymore. But this is my recruiting one-on-one. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions for me, feel free to leave it in the chat, in the comment section. Let me know how you like this kind of content, if you like to see more sit downs like this. And I've got some other topics I'm going to talk to you all about. I'm definitely going to talk about tips for thriving while black in corporate America. I've got a whole section on that, so come back for that. But if this is helpful, share it to Facebook, share it to Instagram, share it to Snapchat and Twitter, your Tumblr, all of those good places, and invite people to come so that we can glow, grow, and glam together, because we're building our glam life over here. I thank y'all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.